Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Fans Talk Pro Wrestling Podcast. I am your host for this edition, Freddy Carlson, and I am going it solo today, as Angelo and I are trying out a new concept that we are going to work on for this podcast, and it is going to be a three-part series. This episode will be narrated by me, myself, and we will be discussing my love for professional wrestling, and the topic being why do I love professional wrestling and what is keeping me invested, what makes me love it so much, and why it is so important to me. Tomorrow, not tomorrow, but episode 3B will be Angelo's video and version of the same topic. And then episode 3C will be us coming together to discuss the best parts of wrestling in our lives. And so that will be taking place all within the next week or so, but this is episode 3A, the very first edition. And so, getting into it, I'm going to start off talking about where I really began enjoying and loving wrestling as much as I do. And that really stems from years and years ago. I was a young kid, way back in probably second grade. Yeah, second grade. Sometime in the post WrestleMania 2008 time period, because I remember it was shortly after WrestleMania. That's all I kept hearing was a few weeks ago WrestleMania and blah blah blah. That was what I remember hearing on commentary. I don't remember much, but I do remember that. So beyond that, I remember the first thing that I was really introduced to in wrestling was at lunchtime one day in second grade. My friend from across the table was talking about two wrestlers named Edge and Kane, and I didn't know who he was talking about. All I heard was the names Edge and Kane, and so I really wanted to know who he was talking about and what he was talking about, and so I asked, and he told me about wrestling and, Friday Night SmackDown and Monday Night Raw, and that just happened to be a Friday, so I went home and I went to my grandfather, who I had known was a big wrestling fan, and he knew when he was watching it from time to time when I was younger and had seen him with it on. And I asked him if I could watch wrestling with him that night, and he said, of course. So that night we sat down and we watched the episode of Friday Night SmackDown, which was The Undertaker being stripped of the World Heavyweight Championship by Vicky Guerrero for using his Hell's Gate submission hold um, against Edge in a match at Backlash that had just taken place. Actually, it was after Backlash, not WrestleMania that year, after Backlash. But I don't really remember much else from that show or in the few weeks that followed. I remember vaguely the results of the Judgment Day 2008 pay-per-view. Jeff Hardy had returned from his suspension. Triple H faced Randy Orton in a steel cage match. Edge and The Undertaker battled to a double countout when the title was vacant. So my first and earliest memories really start to pick up from the night after the One Night Stand pay-per-view in 2008. June 2nd, 2008 was the episode of Raw, and the main event of that show was what really got me hooked. From then on, there was no going back, and it was Jeff Hardy versus John Cena. And if any of you who know me know as well as I do that personally, with all that bias included, Jeff Hardy and John Cena are my two favorite wrestlers of all time. And there's really not many doubts about that in my head. But regardless of that, from then on I was hooked, and I remember that match was to determine the number one contender to face Triple H for the WWE Championship at the Night of Champions pay-per-view in 2008. And I remember asking my mom, can we buy the Night of Champions pay-per-view? And she said, of course. She always used to give me a little money for not graduating, for finishing the school year. She had been doing so for a couple of years, and she really was just giving it to me so I can keep it in my drawer and feel pretty cool. But she said that we'll use that this year towards the pay-per-view, and so we went and I bought the Night of Champions pay-per-view. And let me tell you, I can remember almost the entirety of that show because it was the first pay-per-view I ever watched. It was the first real introduction to pay-per-view type matches that I had seen, and it was amazing. And so yeah, right off of the bat, I was intrigued, I was hooked, and I was really, really happy. And as that summer went on, I was watching wrestling religiously during the summer. I also bought the SummerSlam pay-per-view. But what really started getting me hooked on the story of it all, and really at a young age getting intrigued into what they were doing, was the long build towards Jeff Hardy becoming the WWE champion. He competed in various matches in mid to late 2008 for the title. The championship scramble match, the ill-fated stipulation that I think we all would care to forget and probably have since until I brought it up just now. I actually just recently rewatched two of those matches, including the one with Jeff in it, just actually today. Um, my days are getting crossed, but yeah. And then he had two matches with Triple H at No Mercy and Cyber Sunday 2008, and no avail there with championship victory. And then the stuff with at Survivor Series where he was taken out in the stairwell, all leading to Armageddon 2008 in December of that year, the last ever Armageddon pay per view. The night that he won a triple threat match with Edge and Triple H also involved, and becoming the WWE champion. And as a kid, I lost my collective mind. It was late. I was trying to go crazy. My family was trying to calm me down. And I just remember going so nuts and being so happy. And it was the greatest moment of my life as a wrestling fan up until that point. So we move along to uh, the excuse me. We move along as time progressed. I just kept getting more and more invested, and I actually made a friend through a mutual wrestling fan. Not the same friend who introduced it to me, but another friend in school, Colin Lynch. Shout out to you, Colin, if you happen to catch this episode or ever end up listening. And for a couple of years, we were watching pay-per-views together relatively often. We watched two WrestleManias together and a couple of other shows. Every time I used to go over to his house, we used to play wrestle with his younger baby brother. Probably not the best thing to do, but nonetheless, we were stupid kids. And some of that stuff was just amazing. As a young age and memories looking back, I was very happy to at the time. I moved into middle school and I met my best friend, who to this day is still my best friend, Alaric O'Brien. Shout out to you, Alaric, if you end up listening to this. And I just remember Alaric and we watched a series of pay-per-views at each other's houses, alternating pay-per-views for a couple of months in 2010. And the bragging rights pay-per-view, Hell in a Cell, all those weird times when Undertaker was feuding with Kane and the Nexus was a thing. And then WrestleMania 27, we watched at my house. Not the best WrestleMania. Really, the only highlight was Triple H and the Undertaker, no holds barred. It was Edge's the night of Edge's last match for 9 years. It was the night John Cena and the Miz main evented, and Miz got overshadowed by The Rock and Cena and all that stuff. But yeah, some of those earlier, younger memories were really important to me. And one of the big things that I take out of loving wrestling is the friendships that it can create for you. I already talked about my friend in elementary school who introduced it to me, and then my other friend who I started watching it with and was able to go to their house, and he came to mine, and we were really big fans. And then we would have, and then Alaric and my best friend and I having a mutual interest over it as well. And moving into high school soon after, there was a lot more of a desire to become more in tune to the inner workings, and I started learning more about what terms were, heel and babyface, and all the other stuff that I ended up learning, and it was all good and fantastic to start learning that. And I made some other good friends through my church and through high school, and that's how I met Angelo. Angelo and we met through some church obligations, but we both were wrestling fans. We were both wearing wrestling shirts that day, and so we started talking about it. And from then on, Angelo and I became good friends, and lo and behold, here we are all these years later running our own podcast. But yeah, I also met some other good friends, Hank and Mark McCallan, father and son, and also JJ Conway. I'll shout out to all you guys. You guys are some of my most fond memories in wrestling come with you guys. Hank and Mark took me to my first NXT Takeover show, NXT Takeover Brooklyn 3, the night that Adam Cole debuted after Drew McIntyre won the NXT Championship. Adam Cole debuted, and they formed the Undisputed Era with Fish and O'Reilly. They took me to my first indie show. I was Ring of Honor Final Battle 2017, the night Cody Rhodes lost to Dalton Castle in the main event for the Ring of Honor World Title. Yeah, some of those memories that I'll hold very fondly. I got to go to an NXT house show with them, a couple of SummerSlams, Monday Night Raw. Unbelievable stuff. Angelo and I, in the course of a year span, went to SummerSlam, WrestleMania, and Money in the Bank. And I'll get into the WrestleMania bit of it in a little while. That has a special place in my heart. But Going back a little bit to the friendships that it formed, really some of the most important memories that I take from wrestling are the stuff that I was able to do with my friends, being at these shows, conversations about it, long drawn not drawn out, but long and detailed discussions that we would have that I loved and that I hope that they loved, and all the fun that we had. From the time shortly thereafter I started watching with Night of Champions '08, my mom and my family knew that I was hooked. They were buying me wrestling action figures and toy championships and T-shirts and all the stuff, and they were making me look like the biggest fan. I was looking the part so much as I was also believing the part, and it was great. Um, and my first, I finally got my a real bed in my own room, and everything settled out as I got older. And lo and behold, first set of bed sheets were wrestling sheets, and my curtains were wrestling curtains, and really made me feel like I was looking the part of a wrestling fan. And as time went on, collections only grew. Christmas and birthdays, and any other time we went to Toys R Us or Walmart or Target, always coming out of there with something wrestling related. It was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And holidays like those, getting all those gifts and getting that kind of stuff, always meant a lot to me because those just grew my collection to an uncanny amount, a large amount. Um, and then venturing slightly off into a slightly separate topic for the time being, um, talking about one question that I get a lot as a wrestling fan, and it's a question that many people, if you're wrestling fans out there, will know about if you've been a fan into your high school years, past being a young kid in elementary, middle school, into high school, and now college and adulthood, as we are, at least as I am, and that is how can you watch professional wrestling or WWE? They often don't know how to generalize it a little more. They just go very specific to WWE and say when you know that it's fake. And we all get that question, and I want to address it. And I like to look at it like this. I know many people, lots of friends of mine, are big fans of shows like The Walking Dead or of Game of Thrones, American Horror Story, any of those types of shows or movies that have a lot of animation and gothic horror, stuff that actually can't physically happen and that doesn't actually happen in the world today, um, or ever really. And I look at it like you people who ask me this question are fans of that, right? And you guys love to go to the movies and watch stuff that you know isn't real. You're not going to go and watch an Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator movie and actually believe that Arnold is a living, breathing, walking robot in this world in 2020 or whatever year you want to ask me the question in. No, you're not going to ask that because you know that it's not true. So when you watch professional wrestling, like I do, you have to take it from the perspective of these guys are out there to entertain us. They are just like actors in movies and TV shows who are acting, playing a character and a role with a specific set of goals while entertaining people and trying to make people pay money to see them and buy tickets and merchandise and all the stuff that you same things you do in TV and movies and get people to watch and have ratings and all that. And they just do it in a live format, and it makes it even harder. Yeah, you can't expect them to go out there and take a million unprotected chair shots to the head and all these crazy bumps that guys like Shane McMahon and Jeff Hardy end up taking in their careers, and so many others, and expect them not to get hurt unless there's precautions to protect them. And when those precautions go wrong, serious injuries occur. Look at Stone Cold Steve Austin. Look at Bret Hart. Look at these guys whose careers were cut short or ended because of career-threatening injuries. Daniel Bryan and Edge had to retire for several years each because of their career-threatening injuries. Paige is still unable to compete. Corey Graves, so many guys who can't compete because of these injuries that they sustain while in the ring. So it is very dangerous, despite the fact that it's quote-unquote fake. So that's one of the debunks that I like to give towards that, number one. But also, it is an entertainment business, and you know what it does for me? It entertains me. I enjoy it so much. I love it. I can't watch an episode and not find probably at least one thing that I didn't find entertaining or enjoyable or at least redeemable. Some stuff is really not great. I will admit that. We all know it as fans. We all critique it very heavily. But we know that this is something we love. This is something that we have dedicated our lives to. I mean, from a young age for me, it wasn't just a thing that I wanted to watch a couple times a week. It wasn't just something that I liked to tune into if I had time or maybe buy a couple of things here and there, a couple of toys, and call it a day. No, this was something that grew and grew and grew. It was more than a fad. It was more than just another interest, and it was more than just something that a kid's gonna go through. It stuck with me, and through everything that may have come and gone, being a younger guy who, as you're a kid, you like this, you like this, you like that, and as time passes on, it ends up going away, and you end up finding something else in the long run. Well, that never happened for me with wrestling because it stayed despite everything coming and going, and that's one of the other important things for me is it stayed a constant in my life through all the ups and downs in my personal life, in my school, and everything that I was doing and everything that I was involved in and had to go through. You know what the one thing was that was constant from the time I was a young kid? Professional wrestling. And what it provided me was an outlet and an escape from the real world and its problems. If I didn't want to face the facts of a situation, if I didn't want to have to deal with anything, you know what I would do? I would be able to turn to watching any type of wrestling match, whether it was old or new, live or taped, didn't matter. I was able to look at it and watch it and be taken away from the difficult situation presented to me in front of me in that moment in life. And that is so, so important to me because I had some tough times and wrestling got me through it and got me out of it and kept me safe and sane that I don't think anything else could have really done, all things considered. And so, call it fake all you want. It ain't fake to us. It's something we all love, and we're wrestling fans. Moving back towards the point of friends and how important a community of friends is in the wrestling world in this day and age, and how it's amazing to have. I mentioned several instances of people who I became friends with and how they meant so much to me. And speaking very specifically about one now, JJ Conway, who I mentioned before, I met in freshman year of high school because we both had mutual friends who introduced us, and we immediately clicked because we found out we were wrestling fans. And so we were talking about it and chit chatting, and that would be the case anytime we would get together. We didn't see each other all that often at first. Every now and then in the lunchroom or passing in the halls or maybe outside the building before or after school, and we would chit chat about wrestling sometimes, most of the time, very briefly. It wasn't a heck of a lot. And when the time came, and we got closer and we got to know each other a little bit better, we started going to shows together. And another thing that I wanted to mention before, we were talking about my journey from my earliest days in wrestling. Talked about my first show that I remember watching and how I got started and what made me fall in love with it. That first match with John Cena and Jeff Hardy, and then the story of Jeff's climb to the mountain and trying to become the champion. But I remember my first live event. My first live event was in July of 2011, a couple of years after I started watching wrestling. I went with my aunt and my grandfather. I would watch most pay-per-views that I wasn't watching with friends with them, and we would be watching them upstairs in my grandparents' house together. Um, and going to that first live event with them was really special. And I remember that the opening match was some sort of battle royal, 10 man, 15 man. I don't remember exactly what. It was won by Wade Barrett because the winner ended up facing Randy Orton in the main event that night for the World Heavyweight Championship. And yeah, it was really fun. It was cool. It was different. It was interesting. And you know what? It was a good time, and it was the best thing I had ever been to at that point in my life. I had yet to experience anything quite like that night, and it was so fun. And I ended up being able to go to so many things later on, as I talked about indie shows. I've been to 2 NXT takeovers. I've been to Money in the Bank, 3 SummerSlams, and WrestleMania. And again, I'm going to get into WrestleMania in a little bit because that experience to me was very important as well, and in my story and in my journey. But going back to JJ, through the course of our talks in high school, some of the things that we would discuss made me really start to consider something that I hadn't really taken super seriously, but I had felt lingering in my mind and in my thoughts for a long time now, and that was that maybe, just maybe, somehow, some way, me being a professional wrestler, being in that ring and competing, could be a legitimate possibility. I wanted it. I know that I felt like I was capable of it, and I know that I believed in my ability to get there. But you're still a freshman, sophomore in high school, so you're not really taking that thought too seriously just yet. The question is, if time continues to pass and you get older and you still go into different aspects of life, will that dream still be there, and will that dream manifest into feeling more like a necessity and an actual goal? And you know what? It has. I mean, I'm almost 20 years old. My birthday is in a couple of days as of recording this video, and I know for a fact that I am very, very excited about what I've really recently agreed to do in my head. At some point in the next couple of years, I have guaranteed myself that I'm at least going to attempt a shot at wrestling school. And through various conversations that JJ and I had of us both wanting to be professional wrestlers, this is what sparked it. I know that he's off doing his own thing right now, but I really truly do want this to be a possibility, and I know for a fact that if I give it my best shot, I don't know if I will ever give it up. Even if I feel like I might fail, even if I might end up not doing so well, I might end up look like I'm failing. I might end up actually being a failure at it. But I'm not going to give up. I'm going to fight. I'm going to push. This is a goal of mine, and I am determined to at least see it out as far as I can. And thanks to JJ and those conversations and the various things that I've been able to experience in my life, and this up to this point with wrestling, that's a goal that I feel like is extremely attainable. So I want to move now to discussing WrestleMania. Um, WrestleMania 35 came through MetLife Stadium in 2019, and they announced it a year or so before. And I remember being extremely adamant to my mother and to my friends that I had to go to the show because when they rolled through in 2013 for WrestleMania 29, I was too young to be able to afford my own ticket and to go on my own. And there was just no way for me to get there. And so I ended up watching the show from home, like I did every other pay per view and big show that I had been watching. Um, and it was just a tough thing for me to do. I really didn't want to miss that WrestleMania in 2013, but I knew I had no choice. When it came in 2019, I said to myself, I'm old enough now to be able to get there on my own and to handle it and to facilitate my own trip. And I owe a big thank you to Angelo and his brother for what they did for me in that in regard and getting me a ticket and making sure that I was there with them and there in general. And I remember driving up, and then walking up, especially to the MetLife Stadium. I actually was really in need of a bathroom at that moment in time, but in the back of my head, I was soaking in that moment and saying to myself, this is the most unbelievable show you were ever going to witness. This is exactly what you have waited for and wanted for so many years. This is the pinnacle of a wrestling show for a fan or for a superstar. And I walked into that building, and the first time I laid eyes on the ring and on the stage, I almost started crying. I had tears in my eyes, but I fought it back because that was the moment where I realized the goal of that dream of being a professional wrestler, and me saying I'm going to let it ride out and see if it stays. It stayed, and it stayed, and it stayed, and it stayed, and then showing up at that building that night and seeing that ring and seeing that ramp and seeing that stage, I had no doubt in my mind. This is something that I absolutely have to try and follow through on. This is something I absolutely have to try and see through. This is absolutely something that I need to give a shot because I want the next time they come to MetLife Stadium, I want to be in that ring and walking down that stage as a superstar. And that's a little goal I've set for myself because of what I have been able to love and feel and experience through professional wrestling. And so that show, from top to bottom, I mean, while it may have had its ups and downs, I'm sure, as a show itself, I was hooked, I was enjoying it, and I was in love with what I was watching. I felt like a kid again. Being able to watch that show and feeling like a kid at nearly 19 years old is a tough thing to do. But you know what? WWE, they did it. They made me feel that, and I am so thankful to have been able to be there that night and to have experienced that. Because absolutely no way in my head did I ever think for even a second that could have been a possibility. Um, and so circling back to the concept of friends and their importance, another thing that I find very important in what we do is being able to talk in wrestling and talking shop or shooting the breeze or whatever you want to view it as. I think that it's vitally important that we do this. I mean, number one, this podcast is something I've been wanting to do for a while because it provides me an open forum to talk about something I love as much as professional wrestling. I mean, I think it's clear to see through what I've been saying here in this podcast episode that this business and this art form that we all love as fans is very important to me and personal in my heart, holding a special place. And so, having talks about it is extremely important. And over the course of time and in my life, guys like Mark and Hank and Angelo and JJ are all guys I've been able to have conversations with. And I want to give a special shout out to the guys in the Instagram group chat. Y'all know who you are, Tim Austin, everybody who, if you happen to be listening to this at any given point, you guys are really important to me and in my story when it comes to professional wrestling because For those who might not know of what they are, Instagram wrestling leagues are leagues ran on Instagram where all you have to do is comment who you want to win on matches through your people owning superstars and then voting. And certain people run it, book it like it's a wrestling show that you would see on TV. And for years, I was a member, and they invited me to join their group chat of owners and just to be, to become friends with them. And let me tell you right now, they have become really important friends to me because the talks that we get to have on any given day and at any given time regarding any given topic is super duper important to me, and I have felt so much closer to people. These people, even though I've never met any of them, actually, it's all through social media and online. But this friendship that I feel like they provided me with through this friendship. I feel like they provided me with something super important, and that is a place to talk about some of these important things. I mean, as fans of wrestling, we want to talk about it. So we'll live talk about shows. We'll talk about what's happened. We'll talk about breaking news. We'll talk about anything, even if it's non wrestling related, honestly. And that's what I also love about it. But they pushed me to be more. They actually convinced me to start my own wrestling league. And so I'm a proud owner of one. Follow at ECAW League on Instagram if you want to join. A little cheap plug there, but we're talking wrestling, so the cheap plug and the cheap pop, two important aspects of being a babyface. But nonetheless, yeah, they pushed me to do that. They pushed me to start this podcast. They pushed me to do a lot of things, and I'm very appreciative of that. And we've actually had very deep talks ourselves over the course of the years, talking about things like stuff you've seen in the first couple episodes of this podcast, some stuff that you'll probably see in future episodes. That being wrestling fans, you can talk about all the time. Mount Rushmore's top tens, favorite superstars, all of our personal bests and favorites and moments in history, and all that stuff that you could talk about. It's absolutely amazing to have friends like that, and it's not just them too. I mean, they're great, and as all the guys I've mentioned in this video, all my friends who I feel like have been instrumental in my wrestling life are very, very important to me. And so, yeah, you see all these various aspects. We talk about my first live event, my first WrestleMania, my first indie show, my first friends all the friends I've made through this long and interesting journey of being a fan. And really, it comes down to the simple fact of, well, what what does this all mean in the grand scheme of things? I've been here talking for probably a half an hour now regarding my obsession with wrestling and my love for the business and all of the things regarding professional wrestling that make it so important, excuse me, to me. What what's the purpose of it? What's its importance and what's its meaning? And I think at the end of the day, it's all of those things, and the all the above answer is it shapes who I am, and it shapes a lot of what my life has become. I've taken a lot of pride in being a wrestling fan. I wrote my college essay on professional wrestling. Only a handful of people know that. The people who saw it and looked it over, but also the handful of friends that I shared it with. I wrote my college essay about wrestling, and I feel like that's obviously what plays a role in me getting accepted into my college. And it is one of my I like to write, and that is one of my favorite pieces to this day. What I was able to write with my college essay. And so, I look back on it from time to time to remember why I love wrestling, number one, but also to remember how important it is in my life. And I actually did kind of take a look at it when preparing for this podcast episode, and being able to truly, truly, truly feel as though I am prepared to keep wrestling in my life for as many years as I can. And it seems as though it will never leave. And I hope it doesn't, because I want it to stay. I want it to be a part of my life. Obviously, if me wanting to be a wrestler is going to be a goal that stays, then we're going to keep it there. And one other point I wanted to make regarding wrestling fans, Hank, as I mentioned before, one of my friends who was a big wrestling fan, and he's been a fan for 40 years. Hank's a great guy. Hank, shout out to you if you happen to catch this. But yeah, he said to me something one time regarding NXT crowds compared to main roster crowds in the WWE that is absolutely true. And I've kept it with me through all these years, but I also took it to mean a little something different at the same time. And I think that it also rings true all the same. And that is that when you are experiencing a live NXT crowd, it is unbelievably different than what you'll experience when you experience a live main roster crowd. because the people who are there are all in unison. They're all one family. You feel like you are together. And when you and any wrestling fan can attest to this, when you are together under that roof, in that building, in that arena, in that crowd for that one night, for that one show, even if it's just for one match, you are a family. You are united in a single belief and in a single interest and love and a common opinion that professional wrestling is the greatest thing in the world. We are there for it. We are there to support it. We are there to love it. We are there to be a part of it. And it is absolutely true. And that stems from just the fact of an NXT crowd to a main roster crowd, which trust me, is something special because I was there at NXT Takeover Brooklyn 3, and that crowd was hotter than any crowd I've been a part of. And I've been to various I've been to 3 SummerSlams, house shows, and all the other types of stuff I've been to. And then I also got to go to NXT Takeover 25, and it was the same feeling. And I actually brought my aunt to NXT Takeover 25. That was her first live televised show. That wasn't a house show that she'd been to with me, and she absolutely loved it. She couldn't believe how loud and into it that crowd was. Her personal favorite, Adam Cole, Baby. She loves the pop that he gets and the interactions with his entrance. Um, and same thing with my dad. I took my dad to SummerSlam 2015, a little bit of a deviation from the point, but I wanted to bring it up. My dad's first and only live televised pay-per-view show that wasn't a house show that he came to with me was SummerSlam 2015, and him and I both got to witness The Undertaker live and in person. And I mean, as big of a fan as I am, I've only seen Undertaker in person once, and I got to witness his entrance. I got to witness him wrestle. That was something special to me, and it really hits me hard. And I have tears in my eyes just thinking about how amazing that night was and how amazing that moment was. And I'm so glad I got to share it with my dad. And stuff like that really means a lot to me because my dad and I, we don't get to do a lot of stuff like that together. We've been to a couple of house shows at MSG and Barclays and even the county center, the Westchester County Center, which was the place of my first live event with my aunt and my grandfather. My aunt and I, the tradition of going to the county center whenever they come through town. Those types of things I keep with me because having my family there is just as important as doing anything with my friends. And so, as I said, I owe a big debt of gratitude to the guys who've taken me to my first indie show, my first NXT show, NXT house show, SummerSlam, Raw, WrestleMania, all the guys I've been there with. It's just as important with my friends as it is with my family, and that's one thing that I'm really adamant about. I love it. All those people, my friends and family who have been there with me at wrestling shows, are so important. But to conclude the other point I was making before regarding the crowds, I take it that as if you're a wrestling fan, and this is how I really confirmed it at WrestleMania last year, was that a live crowd, when you are at a wrestling show, you are a family, and you are all together in unison, and you are all one voice, one people, one set group of people that will be dictating how a large population are going to be viewed, and that's unbelievably accurate to me, unbelievably important to me, and it's super super cool to be a part of it and to have been a part of so many wonderful crowds like NXT Takeover Brooklyn 3, like ROH Final Battle 2017, NXT Takeover 25, SummerSlams 2015, 18, and 17 and 18. Monday Night Raw the night after SummerSlam 2016, and WrestleMania 19, WrestleMania 35 in 2019. All that kind of stuff really just unbelievable to me, and yeah, that's some of the many things that I could say amazing about wrestling. And you've heard the very much Cliff Notes version of my story. I could definitely go on for hours and hours talking about wrestling and its importance in my life and talking about all my favorite memories. In case you can't tell, I'm literally like an encyclopedia. Many people have complimented in my life how much of a memory I have when it comes to sports and stuff like this, and especially wrestling. And so, it's just kind of a thing that I've been lucky with. I can name any random match and moment, from anything that I have seen, and a lot of stuff that I even haven't seen that I just know of, and I know when they happened, and I know what happened. Just to drop a random match on you, John Cena versus Big Show in a steel cage match at No Way Out 2012, with John Laurinaitis' job on the line. I'm not reading anything when I say that to you. I'm just spitting that off the top of my head, or anything like that. It's very cool. It's very fun for me. I love to display facts like that If you've listened to the first couple episodes, you'll see that I have a vast knowledge of superstars' resumes and accolades. And let me tell you right now, none of that was read. I mean, all of that was just spit of the top of my head facts that I know about the superstars, the amount of title reigns they had, their overall resume accolades of WWE, and even beyond that, some guys, matches, dates of matches, shows, when the shows happen, where, what, stipulations, who's involved. I can name it, and it's so cool to me. And to be able to say that that's something that I can take as a part of my everyday life with wrestling, and naming the theme song, and knowing the theme songs and singing along to them, all of that stuff. Unbelievable, fantastic. I love it. It's a very, very special part of my life that I'm so thankful to have. And yeah, all of what I've been going on about in the last half hour or so has just really been a culmination of my thoughts as a wrestling fan. Why do I love wrestling? What got me involved in it? Why do I stay involved in it? Why do I keep watching? And why is it so important to me? All these very, very big and deep questions that revolve a sport and a genre that we love as much as we do as wrestling fans. It is unbelievable, and I love professional wrestling. WWE, AEW, New Japan, Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling. I love professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is more. I've seen the pictures on Instagram and social media, and it's true. We are more than just a group of people. We are more than just fans. We are more than just people who attend a show. We are not just fans of professional wrestling. We love professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is our life. And in that way, and in that vein, and in that respect, I cannot disagree more. I cannot agree more. I cannot disagree. It is the most perfect form of entertainment, sport, and athleticism, and everything. I can't say any more about it. So this time I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to episode 3A of the Fans Talk Pro Wrestling Podcast. Once again, I've been your host for this episode, Freddy Carlson. Stay tuned in the coming days as Angelo Belli will host episode 3B of this podcast, and he will give his version of this same topic and go into detail on what is important to him, why wrestling is important to him, what got him into it, why he loves it, and a handful of other topics. And then also, shortly thereafter that, we will have an episode coming to y'all, episode 3C, the conclusion of this three-part series that discusses, is just Angelo and I together discussing professional wrestling and some of its high points in our life, and why, discussing amongst each other as friends and as old friends, longtime wrestling buddies, but also we're just good friends in real life. And we'll be discussing that in episode 3C. So I thank you for your time, and always remember, never be afraid to talk pro wrestling. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.